Or if you deal with the organs, as we said, if you're dealing with the heart, use that as a gateway to, what is the invisible heart? What is the sun? What is the invisible sun? As a gateway to it. Not just a reflection of it, but as a veritable gateway. Same thing with, the liver. You can do that for Jupiter, according to different correspondences. You can do it with anything. You do it with your fingernail. It doesn't have to have the association, but it's a focal point of energy within you that you begin to focus in on, using your own body and the mechanisms of the body and the energies of the body for your own awakening. Okay. Another one is to sit in the dark and focus on the space around your head and shoulders. Just kind of relax and concentrate as if, kind of have this sphere or bubble around you. But I don't want you to visualize that. I just want you to listen to the space around you. A good time to do that is between 2 and 3 a.m. So if you happen to wake up in the morning at that time, you can go sit for a few minutes, do that, and then it's very good. Another one is to, and this is good, is to stand, like a pentagram, or to stand, like a pillar with your hands above your head, and your feet together, and to do that as long as you can until you're exhausted. And then when you're exhausted, pay attention to the response of your attention. Pay attention to your mind, how it responds to that exhaustion. Dream work, of course, body of light work, all very important. Some things I want to talk to you guys about that is somewhat peculiar is, again, on the path we have different things that arise. And we can consider them pathologies. How do they arise out of that void? And it's because people are very sensitive to the environment around them. As we're talking outside, people are sensitive, and then they repress that sensitivity, or that sensitivity is not accepted. They don't have a way to discuss it. They're not welcome. Their church, their family doesn't believe in it. So they create the kind of neurotic response to it, an obsessive response. When this happens very young, this obsessive response can be to keep very busy, or to chatter a lot, or to pick something to do repeatedly over and over and over again. Because it's a way of keeping the mind focused out here so that it doesn't have any way of falling into that void again, into that gap, and maybe either experiencing something of a psychic nature or of an interior nature that they may feel guilty of it. Guilt is manageable, although it can be very difficult and very, very destructive. And I often joke with people, I say, I'm not Catholic. I wasn't raised Catholic or Jewish, so I don't do guilt. And then they all laugh about it. I don't do guilt. I either do it or I don't. Okay. And that goes back to that phrase, do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. Do what you want. That's the law. What you pick to be the law is your own thing. Just take responsibility for it. See, people want to do things but not take responsibility for it. And that's where they get conflicted. Choice. It's your life. It's your becoming. This is where he said there are no rules at this point except a handful. And that's one of guiding principles. Now, when you take your experiences and you decide to communicate them to others, you may have to remember what are these first and second and third vehicles that we talked about. You have to put it in language that others can understand. So you use those vehicles as a way of communicating. Understand? But not necessarily all the time. Some people you can communicate to as we have very freely and openly. But others say, no, I need tradition. That's fine. We all did. That's fine. And you have a tradition to transmit it. Now, when getting back to my earlier statement, some of these things that people can experience is kind of a trauma. And the psychic trauma can occur when having different practices. One will call it the terror of the threshold. It's its own trauma in its own way. You suddenly see this thing, and it's kind of an objectification of your own neurotic habits that you've built up over the eons. Other times you may have something as a child. Night terrors are very common. Or as you said, you grew up across from a cemetery. Other people, have environments We have a host of invisible beings. We're surrounded by a sea of invisible beings that we don't necessarily always recognize or interact well with. Old traditions had ways of dealing with them, whether it's offering milk or, as you said, bread or water. We kind of have a remainder of that at Halloween. We have a fragmented remainder of that tradition. But, as one encounters things, one has to be able to process it. And if it goes unprocessed, it creates a neurotic or obsessive habit. If it creates enough of a neurotic or obsessive habit, that will somatize and then create physical illnesses as a result. We've had a fairly good set of documentations on some of these, but at the same time, over recently I came across more information that was quite good, quite well done from the 60s and 70s, about what are the role of migraines, asthma, bowel issues, and even psoriasis in psychic trauma. And I've discussed this with you to some degree. But look kind of at yourself in your life and notice what is going on with folks, or with yourself, if you have any of those issues. It seems that asthma is a very common experience in people during a psychic crisis. And that explains often adult onset asthma, which explains mine. I got it in late 20s. Never any problems before. So you see that sometimes. I don't experience it much anymore. I don't think I've used any kind of inhaler in maybe 2 years. And I think I used it if I was maybe once a year, like 5 or 6 years, 7 or 8 years before that. So for me, I don't even consider really having it because I don't have any of the, I've never had any of the classic symptoms, I have dogs, we have mud and dust, and stuff. I don't have any of that kind of difficulty respiratory stuff that I can remember, recently. And that means over the last few years. So, again, what often happens with those situations? People have trouble breathing because their chest grows tight. Now, I don't know what the exact chemical and neurological response is, but I could say that's a lot of tension, that's ripping into this area if you feel as though you can't breathe. So what do they tell you to do? Go stand in front of a freezer or something, breathing cold air that supposedly helps. A couple times I remember it did, back in my 30s. But at the same time, I know relaxing and being relaxed. Relaxation means that the body is not triggering those habituated responses. Okay. So if you look closely at the history of a lot of biographies of people who go through the path, you'll notice that we often ignore their illnesses. But those illnesses are signals of stuff coming up and being jettisoned in a lot of ways. So it's good. That's why we say you bring everything into your journey rather than just rejecting it. But you have to know what to do with it once it arises, not let it be a burden. And many people, it just stays with them because they haven't processed whatever is arising with it. I thought it was very interesting that this one physician was saying psoriasis or skin issues were associated with it. But I know that skin and nerve issues are often associated with what's called Naga disease. So I haven't quite spent much time thinking about that, but that kind of nervous issue, that tendency, that need for everything to be just right, and the skin, of course, is what a purifying entity. It allows for the body to be purified, It also, I remember one audiologist saying it's basically undifferentiated ear tissue. That the body is one giant ear, the way it responds to sound, especially the way the sound is off the body. That was good. He was, I think, an Italian audiologist. We did a lot of research on Gregorian chant. Okay. Regardless of this, I just throw these ideas out there for you to think about it. Looking at illnesses that you have had and when you've had them, looking at illnesses other people have and when they've had them. What are the conditions around at the time? How is the body processing the information and the energy? Okay, because it can also be environmental. We have environments that are very helpful and healthy for us, but then we can go into other environments and we become affected by them if we don't know how to relax, if we don't know how to do rites of purification, like we talk about in the earliest teachings, how to purify yourself, how to purify space. You know, these aren't just dog and pony shows all the time. They often are meant to be a very real operative work, but they can be reduced to just being going through the motions if we don't either understand what we're doing or don't really believe in them. And I'm very much reminded of a Lutheran minister who I interviewed years ago on an exorcism. And he said, oh, you know, I don't know what to do. I mean, the house, they've got problems, the family's got all these issues. You know, stuff's going on, and so they tell me, so I call the bishop. And we don't do this kind of thing. So the bishop says, look, just go in there and do a house blessing, and just that should make them feel good, you know, because if that'll make it go away. Because, you know, it's not real. It's all in their head. But they're good churchgoers, so we're going to, who's also, you know, the father, when he was a youngster, was involved in Pennsylvania folk magic, you know, so, and where it's not real, we'll just make them feel good. So the minister goes in there and he says, I'm doing the house blessing. He goes, and just when I get to the end, you know, he goes, I mean, he says, it was like a train went by. The whole house just starts to shake. He goes, now up until that point, I thought I was just going in there and we're going to, you know, make them feel good. He goes, at that point, he goes, I got really scared. I suddenly realized, you know, that was his idea. Wait, there really is something to this? And how often don't we see that? There really is something to this. See, he didn't really believe. I often hear people say when they're frustrated, oh, Jesus. And I say, it only works if you believe. And then there's a pause as they try to process it. Yeah. I just say it out of habit. It's a bad habit. So, you know, think of these things and notice the folks around you, you know, if they're having anxieties, you know, when does it relate to? One of the more interesting ones that I came across is that notion of night terrors that I talked to you guys, some of you about. And that is the experience that children often have, although it can be adults, but usually children, of encountering some kind of psychic presence in their room or near it. They're not asleep, they're not having a dream, but they feel that they're not alone and that there's something there. And that this experience can be so dramatic and so real and even take on form that it emotionally damages them. And that unresolved emotional damage then results in physical illnesses and psychological. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'd like to see how common this really is. So I asked some of you, you know, when dealing with folks, just kind of try and bring it up, but also think about it yourself, because we are living in an exchange of energies between the visible and the invisible. Yeah. Now, if we know it, then we can deal with it. When we deny it, then we're done for. And that's where the real trauma is in the denial, not in the experience.
Like the alien abductions?
Yes, because I don't believe alien abductions are UFOs or extraterrestrials in that regard. I don't believe that.
Do you have any idea what it might be?
I think it's something else. I think it's something closer to home. Jacques Vallée, he did the earliest stuff. I mean, he came to the conclusion that these were not, the activities of UFOs did not, and he was involved in several esoteric orders, by the way. He believes that they were something else because the phenomena was too peculiar. So this makes any sense. There's no reason for this kind of stuff to be happening. You know, if they have this advanced technology, you know, why are they doing this weird stuff? You know, well, you know, listen, so it's something else. And he also said that it violated the known laws of science. And what he meant by that, it just the way the phenomena was working just wasn't rational. It should be, the phenomena should have been more rational. You know, particularly since we're dealing theoretically with something that's more advanced than us. Instead of the fact is it was the opposite. Although he did point out something that was very interesting in one book, was that he goes, how is it that you have cattle mutilations occurring in the area of where was it? Where's the NORAD's mountains? NORAD. Yeah, why? It says, how is it that you have this in the most heavily radar-defended place on Earth? How is it that you can have this occur? You know, and then what he discovered was that the mutilations very often were not, because they were all done with surgical precision, and only once did they recover any evidence at that time, up until that time. And the evidence was a U.S. military-issued surgical blade, scalpel, the blade. Is it that they?
What, wasn't it a laser scalpel?
Not at that time. And this is back in the 60s or the 70s. He was coming at the tail end of the last major UFO research that they sponsored. I'd have to go back and look that up, but that was his point. He said this stuff. He says it's something else. He said, and that's what makes it more frightening, because if it's close to home and it's occurring and we're not aware of it, you know, then it's frightening because it's not controllable. He goes, at least if it were, you know, little green men from outer space, there'd be a notion of being technologically able to come to the degree of advancement where we might be able to counter them or find something there. He goes, this was something else. That was his view. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
But that goes to show how we process information and how we try to make it manageable.
Mm-hmm. I also noticed that there's like with the UFO phenomenon, but this real negation of the spiritual, because you'll notice that a lot of UFO enthusiasts will be atheists.
Right, it's kind of what the Trump would call spiritual materialism.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the ghost hunting. What I've noticed with most of the ghost hunters that I've run into, even the reasonable ones, they're fundamentally Roman Catholics.
Yeah.
And what they're looking for is some kind of evidence of afterlife survival. But their model of all their encounters falls into this very deeply, starkly dualized view. It falls, you know, they don't have room. I mean, they're pleasant, but they don't have real room for any other possible interpretation or understanding of the events. So everything quickly degrades to this angels and demons modality. And their whole notion of exorcism is there's only one, and that's the Roman Rite.
Right.
They don't have any other way of dealing with anything, and that is not a terribly effective way of dealing with things. As I pointed out to some. I mean, what do they go, no, I don't know. And that doesn't mean that other schools are much more effective. I mean, in theory they are, but in practice they're often not. So, you know, when we're dealing with these invisible energies, they have an effect on us. The environments have an effect on us. And that's what we're trying to say. That's why getting in tune with the environment is very important, because then you know how to respond. If you feel dirty or contaminated, good. Go home and wash. That's okay. You know all that feeling. We've all been there. Maybe we were all to the same bar when that happened. I don't know, but you know, that's what happens. But with some places you feel good and uplifted, and others kind of neutral. So just pay attention to the environment, your responses and the energies, and that's all telling you something. Okay? Now I have here several books, and someone asked me, they said, you know, different meditations. And, you know, over the years I was talking to a good friend of mine, many months ago, and we started looking at different things to help people with. We're kind of tired of highly organized structures. And I said, well, the problem with that is, unless someone has tremendous self-discipline, it's very difficult to move forward on the path. You usually need a teacher, someone who can help you. You need a good teaching, and then discipline to follow through and to check back in. And that's why we have schools and orders and societies and those kinds of things. But if someone feels that they've reached the end of that, or that they're able to work out on their own, what do you tell them to work with? I said, well, we'll go over a few things. And one of the things we came across, that I came across, was the Vijnana Bhairava. And this is the I came across it first in this book. It's a very few brief pages. Let's see. That's all it is. Okay? And it's essentially a first century Kashmiri text on meditation. And I went through it, I thought, well, it's not very interesting. I said, I remember this, I remember that. Oh, okay, this is cool. And I recognized when I got to the end of it, there were 112 meditations. Okay? And every one of them was one that I had received somewhere along the way. There wasn't one of them that I hadn't gotten. Okay? And some of them were held off as being, the super secret stuff. Well, okay, I get it. In the context I received it, it was needed some contextual work to help you understand it, but fundamentally all of them were here. Every one of them. In fact, some of them were combinations. Like they would take, it's 112, you might see 3 or 4 or 5 of them mixed together to form the practice. Okay. And they don't require, again, since it's an experiential system, it doesn't require any kind of predetermined philosophical or theological view because it's a practice, you do them. So then I said, well, let me read a few things about it. So then I went out and I got these commentaries on the practice. And I talked to my friend about it, and he received the same ones, and we were going over them, saying which ones we thought might be better than others. We think this one is probably one of the easiest to read. This one is very technical in its language, but still very useful. However, then we came across this one quite by accident. This was joyful. This is one of those blissful moments when you go, ah, that's so good, that's great. It was this one.
Oh
Now,
my God.
I remember Rajneesh, I had his original comments on this, back when it was written in a 5-book series. I had them. And I remember years ago, in the late 70s, early 80s, someone telling me that, Rajneesh is a strange fellow, but he's brilliant. He said, his commentaries in there are brilliant. Now, I had no context to understand it, so it was just, it went in and it stuck, but it, just hung up on a peg because there was nothing else to do with it. I have to tell you, I haven't listened to the CD, but when I read his commentaries in here, which is basically transcripts of his talks, they were brilliant. They really were. Because it's the direct experience of the mind. Your mind, your mind, your mind, your mind, your mind, my mind. And how it responds to different things and how to manage it and how to deal not just with these internal abstract ideas of mind, but in daily life. When you're having this feeling or this emotion, great. This is what to do with it. Again, if you were to go study tantric Buddhism, and I'm sure if you were to study some schools in Taoism, if you were to study a lot of the tantric schools in India, you would get all these meditations over time in much more complex formats with much more intense and detailed visualizations, because that's what helps you build the imagery and the confidence. But if you want just the meditative essence of it, which those are based upon, because this goes to the 1st century. Most of those things come in the 4th century. Patanjali doesn't come till the 4th century. This is 300 years earlier than that. This is considered the root tantra for all these other practices. Okay? That's it. Anything I got within any of my Western esoteric training that was of value, I found replicated here.
Is it an easy read, or is it?
He's easy to read. He's great to read. It's transcripts of his talk. He's very casual. He's a brilliant fellow.
Now, what's in there? Are they also in all those 3 books? But
Yes, this is now there's some subtle variation in the ordering, and there's some subtle variation on some of the techniques. I think I'd have to go back and actually call them out, and I don't feel like doing it, to see where there's variations, like in the actual details of the practice. But if you have some skill set in meditation, the 12 pages that are in this book are sufficient. And, when you talk about Shakti, or Shakti and Shiva, Shiva you think of as, well, that's Adonai, and Shakti is the Shekinah. And the way to think of it that way is, Shiva is the the essence, meaning that the force, the I. But the Shakti is the emotional energy that brings it into being. What did we say earlier? Our objective mind, the I-ness, the emotional energy of the unconscious. They unite to bring it into being. And where does that happen? Right here. That's why this world is so important. That's why any earth-denying or life-denying system, which we think of as life, is really counterproductive to your well-being. That's why the systems that seem to do the best are tantric Buddhism as opposed to Hinayana. No one wants Hinayana, they can go away. Most Taoism, except the philosophical schools. Who cares about that, right? Give me the stuff. Those are the ones that do the best, because it's life-affirming. Meaning, in part, it's non-dual. It may not actually be, but in part it's saying you can take everything in your life and bring it to the path, bring it to your own unfoldment. There's nothing that is of no value to you. And that's what I'm telling you here. And what I taught you today was, in essence, and I have some papers I'd love to give you, but it's like 500 pages, and I don't know if we have time to get them copied. We may have to wait for some other time or some other way, but, when I received many of those teachings, decades ago, and practiced them diligently, it was extremely important at that time that the people I was doing it with were lay people, that they were in the world. Because all too often we have this horribly mythological notion of the recluse. And I think, I run into these people a lot, and honestly, I have they're nice, they're polite, but I tell them, I said, not everyone can have that lifestyle. I mean, I run into these folks who spend their lives going from retreat to retreat. And it's like, that's nice, but that's not working for most of us. We have to do something here. And I've often found, as idealistic as that sounds, these people who lead their lives leading from retreat to retreat, I think they're wasting their money. It'd be better off if they went to Vegas and had a good time, because they're so terribly righteous, in that wonderfully Western Buddhist way, or something else, or whatever Indian way. Those seem to be the two that are often the biggest. You know what I'm talking about. We've all met them. They live in the world of the head. They live in the world of the mind. And that's why. It's easy to go from cocoon to cocoon to cocoon, where everyone agrees with you.
Safe.
It's safe. It's harder to actually be here in the world and be detached, be indifferent. And of course, the more you read about if you read some of the texts that I mentioned, like Danalu's works on Shiva in its relationship to Dionysianism, to cultivate that kind of life-engaging attitude, because it also makes you more detached. You do what you can, and that's it. You're here to help people, not save them. See, those organizations that seek worldwide or universal salvation are essentially life-denying themselves. Because if we don't get it, the horrible things will happen. Well, what? You'll go to hell. Okay, or you won't be saved. Well, what's happened if I'm not saved? We don't believe in hell anymore, so I don't know, but it's bad. Or if you don't achieve enlightenment in this lifetime, you'll be bound to the wheel of samsara. Is this kind of like Conan and the world of pain, the wheel of pain? I don't know, man. That worked out pretty good for him in the end.
I became king.
I don't know. And then they look at you with these stares, because they don't have an answer, because again, it's about avoidance rather than inclusion. So I think that's maybe all we have for today. What's that? Do any of you have any questions on anything? No? Would you actually like me to give you anything else, or do you have enough to go on for now?
You were talking, I think, and I maybe have misheard, about maybe doing a meditation, about bringing up the balls of light, or is that just...
Yes.
You mentioned it, and
Okay.
maybe it's outside the context.
Yeah, this is very simple to do. And those of you who've had some work in ceremonial magic will find this a little easier, but what you need to do is this. You sit and you relax, and then do it with me. Put your feet on the floor. your back straight. Okay. Now, this will not directly bring up the spheres of light, but indirectly creates a condition where they're more easily perceived, especially if you're doing it in a dark room and if you do it with your eyes open. I do not encourage you to do that right now. I encourage you just to do it in a dark room with your eyes closed. And relax. Relax, relax. You can even do the sound. Now visualize around yourself at 9 feet. Some will do it smaller. I do not find that beneficial. Do it at 9 feet from your center, a circle. Now imagine that circle, visualize it with the sense that it is actually a sphere and is actually kind of isolating you from the physical world. Isolating you in the sense that while you're still aware of the physical world, it no longer impinges upon you. That you're increasingly aware of the psychic world, of the subtle energies behind the physical world. At this point, there are many different vowel sounds that can be used. Because of the shortness of time, I'm only going to give you 2 possible ones. The one you've already gotten, and that's the ah sound itself. And this would be more vibrant. It would be ah. The other, of course, would be e ah o. E o. That is a very powerful sound. It's a very good one to get used to using. It brings into effect all of the sounds. It can be thought of as a supreme invocation in its potentiality. Now, as you do this, you have to concentrate and focus on yourself, as we said earlier, as being a microcosm. That is, having all the energies and potentialities within you. So you have that first circle, that first sphere. You are all the divine potentialities and energies within you. You say, Yo. And then you visualize a second sphere or circle around you, about 7 to 5 feet out. And this one is very different in its effect. Well, the first one allowed you to be very conscious and aware of the sounds around you without being overwhelmed by them, so that you could sense the subtle energies around you. This one isolates you from even those. It isolates you completely from this physical, the pull of the physical. And if you wanted to, you could begin at this point to step out or imagine yourself standing outside yourself in that circle of what we call an astral projection, or forming of the body of light. You don't have to do that completely, but you could imagine yourself kind of standing beside yourself, so that your psychic senses are more attuned to the environment. Not just the immediate one, but the entire psychic plane. So as you focus your mind now on being focused entirely on this astral or psychic plane, whatever energies it consists of, you now form a third circle. And this third circle even removes you from that plane, if you will, into just the nature of your own mind. And as you focus on that third circle, you notice there is an essence or point within it which is you. You are that thing. what is the essence of your own being, your own mind, your I-ness, yourself. And allow that to arise. Fall into it, collapse into it. Relax into it. It is here that you pay attention and relax to the sights and sounds around you, and reach out and be open to all the minds, all of the illuminated minds of beings, the communion of saints, the hosts of heroes, the angels and the archangels, the adepti. And recognize that you are there with them in that state of beingness, of I-ness. And just relax in your state. Try not to think. Just feel beingness. Now breathe deep, and stretch, and we're done. See how it works? You recognize that you're here. And then you withdraw some of your sensory input so that you still are here, but you're aware of the subtle energy, the subtle experiences happening here. So what you do then is you create an environment around yourself where you can withdraw from that. You can do this anytime, anywhere. And then as you create that environment, there's not just the subtle energies of this environment right here. There's a whole host of subtle energies, and that's now the second circle. So we're kind of withdrawing now just from the immediate environment to the kind of broader environment as a whole, the broader psychic environment. And at either one of these, before or after that first or second circle, you can actually do some kind of limited astral projection, or you can step outside yourself. It's helpful to do that. Usually to the left. It helps you open up a little more. But even if you don't, that's fine. Okay. And then as you open up to that environment, you notice, well, that environment is still sensory input to your mind. Okay? So what you want to do now is the third circle where you just really kind of, well, I don't even want to be aware of that input. I just want to be aware of what's going on within my own mind. Okay? So the third input is that. And it's the sense of self that exists. But the thing is, within that sense of self, too, you are then, in a certain privileged position. Because if you develop it sufficiently, there are other beings that have that same sense of self that you can have communication with or some kind of attunement with. Okay. So the more relaxed you are, the more just focused on being aware and alert, which is what this is trying to do, the easier it is to open up to that level of communication. Okay. And as you train in it, it will happen more spontaneously. But this is a nice little practice because you can do it anywhere at any time. You don't have to be any special conditions because now your mind is creating the conditions. You understand? Good. That's the short version. Good. Well, it is a little after 5. I want to thank you for arriving on. I want to thank everyone for being here. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. And I'll be here for a few more minutes before we close up and get out.